And welcome to another episode of the Groundswell Podcast, where I connect you to outstanding humans and sustainable ideas. I'm your host, Scott Martin, and this episode I have back for the third time the one and only Bruce Kasanoff. He's somebody who wrote the foreword in my book. I'm so honored to have him as a guest and a repeat guest at that. We talk a little bit about the book, but we talk about philosophy. I try to, of course, talk to him as I normally do about business and marketing, and we just had such a really good, in-depth conversation about somebody who is such a deep thinker and has such a great perspective on so many different areas of life and work-life balance and all the rest. So without further ado, let's paddle in. 3 times the charm. I've got Bruce Kasanoff. Welcome again.
Hopefully I'll do better this time.
Hey, you know what? Your Humans Not Customers is like the third most downloaded podcast episode over 80 episodes or something like that.
Well, I want to get to 1, obviously. So, we're
hard to beat. The 2 that are above you are Guru Singh, his number 1, and Dave Navarro from the Chili Peppers.
Well, he's good, but yeah.
It's got a pretty big fan base.
Right. Yeah, that's true. I guess.
So, we were just chatting before, and you've just recently moved to Bend, Oregon. Give us a little update. What have you been up to? We've had lots of conversation. You were in Park City. What are you up to now? Can you hear me?
Yeah, you paused for a second, but
pardon me. I said, you've been in Park City. You just moved to Bend, Oregon. What are you up to?
Yeah, so I drove around the country from Vermont down to Texas, up to Seattle, and decided, okay, I got to live in Bend, Oregon, and it's interesting. We've talked before about change your environment, change your life, and Bend is different. And I already feel I've been here almost 4 months. It's changing my life. It's a bit more. It's got all the, obsession with the outdoors that Park City, Utah had, but it's a little bit more, I don't know, I don't want to say new agey because that's not really what I mean, but it's just more open to an expansive, grounded way of living, and I'm really enjoying it. And part of it is I wanted to live that way, and I thought this would be a place I can live that way better.
And what's changed for you? You said that things have changed.
Well, I mean, I've been focused on how do you have a more expansive view of the world, and how do you let go of, the easiest way to say this is I'm working with a partner on a book which revolves around the subject of cruft. Have you ever heard that term before?
No.
Okay, so cruft in programming is bad code, it's extra code, superfluous code, that's in the software. And I'm writing a book with an executive coach called, or his name's Heath Dykert, and he's been using that for years to talk about, in people. So you have stuff, we all have stuff we picked up along the way, and we decided to, not decided, but we opted to carry it with us. And some of it's not serving us very well. And some of it's not serving us very well, day after day, year after year, and we don't realize it. So I've been working with Heath on that book for a year, and part of it was he started coaching me, like in order to have me to fully understand what he's seen working with a lot of like conscious capitalism entrepreneurs is you have to become aware of it. You have to become aware of, are you doing this because you genuinely want to do it? Or are you doing it because, somebody told you when you were 5 years old that you're stupid and you're weak, or, whatever it is, or somebody challenged you to, like, I bet you can't catch me. I can, grow my business faster than you can. And so writing the book and moving to Bend simultaneously, that's become, like number 1 on my list. Like, where am I? Am I doing things because, no, this is an intentional decision on my part, or because, fill in the blank, any number of 42 different things. And once you start to do this, you realize, oh my God, like 80% of what I do is because of stuff I carry with me that I don't actually need or want.
So if it's like when you talk about code, is it a little bit like barnacles in the bottom of a ship? Like you're
Yeah.
clearing off things so you can kind of move through life quicker, better, more effectively? Or is it
Yes,
about efficiency or is it about
no,
happiness?
no.
What's it about?
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's things like, well, for example, I would argue that the vast majority of successful people in the world are successful in part as a result to some negative aspects of their life. I didn't
Agreed.
feel loved as a kid, so I'm going to use money as a surrogate for love, and so therefore you build $100 million business, but you build the $100 million business, and you still feel kind of unloved. Even though people tell you you're great, but you don't really believe it. You see that in a lot of actors who are really insecure, even though they have this most amazing, fan base. And so it is some of it's superficial. Like I give you an example. When I was like in sixth grade, sixth to seventh grade, I got bullied a bit, and I never connected it with the fact that as an adult, I hate to be told what to do. If you say, "Could you do me a favor?" I'll gladly do it. You say, "Okay, Bruce, you're going to do these five things." I'm like, "No, I'm not." And I thought, well, I'm being rational. And then a couple of years ago, I realized, no, this is because some idiot kid is still controlling my life. And once you realize that, you say, "Oh, well, now that I understand it, I don't need to do that anymore. I don't need to get upset if you tell me what to do." I say, "Okay, fine, I'll do it." So it can be pretty fundamental. I mean, if you know, I don't know coding well, but I know that I took a Python class once, and if you have anything wrong in your code, it doesn't work. Usually it was a typo, and so some of these things can be pretty insidious. So barnacles is one example, but maybe water in gas tank is a better one because it can be very um, fundamental to who you are. The other aspect of it is that until you do, if I said to you, well, you're not a good example because you basically have a great life already. But if I said to most people, imagine the best possible life that you could have, and I ask them, I'm giving you an example. This is something I've been doing. I take you through like money, fame, values, creativity, whatever it is. Say, imagine the best possible life you can. Like, period. No restraint. Best possible life. Somebody who's earning $125,000 a year will say, "Well, gee, money. I don't know. The best possible would be like $175,000." You say, "Well, okay, but there's no restraints. Could you? Is that really the best you could possibly imagine?" I don't know, maybe 200. Like, the reality is that some people make $200,000 in like a week. So it's just very difficult for people to imagine their best possible life and therefore live it, not because their potential is limited, but because you carry around the stuff you no longer need. Somebody told you, you know, you're the smart one, but you don't work hard enough. Your brother works hard. You're always going to be limited because you don't work hard enough. And you think, my father was, annoying like that, but the reality is that you still carry that around.
It's your operating system.
Yeah.
The couple of things that I want to unpack is when you said about, you know, somebody finds out that they've made $100 million and they're not happy. There's a great quote from Tony Robbins, which is success without fulfillment is the ultimate failure.
Yeah.
And it's that, really like we need to be thinking about what fulfills us. And when you're giving the example of, operating system, and I guess you call it programming, is we all have what's called a primary question. And if you think about it, it's the one thing that guides us to do everything.
Mm.
And the process that I've gone through with that is like, how do you decide to get a parking stall? The reason why that is because you subconsciously just go, like my wife, she's like, what's the most efficient way to get there? And she feels it rubs her the wrong way if I don't park, really is find the closest parking stall. And, we all have, these primary questions. I was a middle child. So my primary question used to be, how do I stand out and make a difference? no fun, no
Mm.
difference. Like I'm in marketing, like that's perfect,
Right,
right?
right, right.
And because I wanted to stand out as adopted child, right? So if we really think about it, we have these primary questions, and we had impressionable ages that were driven by our family and our circumstances, right? And then the third thing was we were talking about primary question of you were said something else. I forgot. I lost my spot. I was trying to make sure I brought this up. I'll come back to it, but it's like you bring up some really interesting ways that people, when they think of business, they actually don't realize that they're an operating system,
Right,
and the
right.
efficiency of like baggage, if you will, right? If you can clear those stories in the past history, you'd be surprised at how many decisions you subconsciously make. It's
Well,
pretty
I'll
surprising.
give you another example. And so my third night in Bend, we had seen a poster for like breathwork session, and so I signed us up, and it was my birthday, and I wanted to do something different, and so we go, and we're expecting like 22 people in a yoga studio. There's 380 people in the Bend Convention Center lying on yoga mats. This guy's got music blasting, and it's a really like a Hollywood version of breathwork. But long story short, it's like 25 minutes, then 15 minutes. You just after you breathe, you have all these experiences, and I spent like half of those that 25 minutes like sobbing and shaking. I wasn't sad about anything. I wasn't reliving some specific trauma. It was just I never had done that before. And after the fact, I realized that that's a pretty common experience. It wasn't like I have trauma. It's just like anybody who does that for the first time, that's what happens. And the overwhelming perception I had was I'm carrying around not just like these different pieces of broken code. I'm carrying all this emotion, and it's just like we've lived. It's not like a good or bad, and you don't let go of it. And because the fact is, if you didn't have to let go of it, then just by doing something as simple as breathing in a pattern for half an hour, you wouldn't have that physical reaction. And I felt so much better. I mean, now we do it every month, and every time I feel so much better because none of us, you don't need to, like, for example, most, like I work like this, I'm leaning forward, to
Mhm.
go like that. So, and so anyway, I'm just very actively, not just for myself, but also for other people, exploring what is it that we need to let go? How easy is it? And it's, I think, a lot easier than people think because what I'm realizing is you don't have to go through 10 years of psychotherapy. You can just do a few things that are incredibly powerful at, oh my God, I feel like I left, 5 years of stuff I don't need outside in the garbage can, and that's great.
It's I've done breath work, and I relate it as defragging your computer.
Yeah,
It's like
no,
it's like a hard reset, and just kind of things that are kind of broken and unsettled. It kind of just clears it out, and kind of you feel centered, you know.
yeah. And
And
there's
I've
multiple ways to do this. I mean, that's the point. There's multiple ways to do this, and what it really takes is, I mean, what you said, the Tony Robbins quote is, if you want to actually feel, successful and fulfilled, well, you just got to kind of, it's like add 10% more of the type of stuff we're talking about. Not you have to go live on a mountain by yourself and plant flowers, and you just need to take a little bit of time to the barnacles, whatever analogy you want to use.
Yeah, I mean, well, my book, that's what I really talked about was the growth loop. Like the growth loop being that is like when you aspire to make impact
Uh-huh.
and transform people's lives, when people are compelled to tell the people because it's such a profound effect,
Right,
whether it doesn't matter whether you're selling widgets or really changing lives like a coach or something. um, this is this is what we're meant to do, is to help each other.
right,
And there's of course I'm trying to relate it to business, but I see that pattern in terms of just the desire to move in that direction, which is changing yourself, like
mhm,
moving to make a difference with yourself, to kind of improve yourself, changing yourself, and then ultimately, when you're really kind of transform, helping other people transform. Because by even you talking about this here, someone's listening to this and they're going to go, "Oh wow, like it's kind of an effect."
right.
Um, you and I were talking about you want to share experiences, other people's experiences. That's like an evolved way of like making a bigger impact. And there's
Yeah, I
some
mean,
fulfillment there.
well, part of it is like, how do you, if you get a glimpse of a better life, if you get a glimpse of an easier way to climb the mountain, you know, how do you spread the word? And Groundswell is a good example of like trying to bring a better way of. Uh, I don't really think you need to differentiate business or life because
It's
business
all the
is life.
same. It's
We're all
integrated.
it's all the same, yeah. And so, what's the best way um, to get increasingly more people to not to pay attention, but to benefit, and especially a lot of the stuff that I mean, I know you've had this experience that when I think of a book, and I think my goal is never to sell books. My goal is to see how many people I can help, in terms of sharing something. Because, like, I mean, personally, the money from a book is, it's much easier to like sell lemonade on the side of the,
Oh,
road
it'll take me years to make my money back.
yeah. So it's just literally, is this a way to help more people benefit? And I see, as you do, I'm sure, so many people who have so much talent who are kind of just missing one or two pieces, not to be successful because they're successful. I know tons of successful people, but to actually be, 100% comfortable in your own skin, that's a different thing. And most people, and I put myself in that category, um, are just a couple steps short of doing that. Not because we can't do it, but because we just haven't quite, you know, got there yet.
When you gave the example before about imagining somebody that makes 100,000 and it was really hard for them to make a leap
Right.
forward, like to,
Hmm.
something incredible. It's like an emotional home. And if you think of a barometer, so in your house, right?
Hmm.
And you go up to 98 degrees and you go, I'm not a 98 degreer. And your emotional home brings you back to, no,
Right.
I'm
Yeah.
100,
Yeah.
125 care, right? And that's what limits people. It's a
Yeah.
it's like a limiter, right? And when you break free from this barometer it's our emotional home, that's what's very freeing for people to be very expansive and see the possibilities of their unlimited potential in my mind.
Well, so I would argue, and this is literally me um, restating what Heath has told me. You know, his universe is people who are unbelievably successful, and um, and anyone else would look at it and say, "Oh my God, they're
They
if
made
I
it.
could be like that person, yeah, they'd be amazing." And even those people have something like you just said that, yes, but I can't do that. Yes, but I know an entrepreneur, I won't name him, who is tremendously successful, has he, he's the worst. I'm not sure dating, but in terms of partners, oh my God, he's like a nightmare. And not because he's not interesting. I mean, he's a very interesting guy. Somehow he just cannot maintain like a primary relationship. And I think, if he could figure that out, and he's great, because I know it's important to him, but he doesn't. And so it's just a question of, you know, we started this by saying, what am I interested in? I'm interested in that because it seems like, that's the final frontier. That's like, how do we really um, deal with that? And also to a certain extent, um, deal with reality. Like, do we see the way the world really works? And do we learn how to influence it? Or do we, um, just kind of keep butting our heads against the wall, an inefficient, way of trying to get things done.
Well, you strike me as someone that's been a seeker
Mhm.
and helping people unlock their blind spots. And you have actively gone after your blind spots.
Right.
And that's usually what most people, it's the very thing that they don't want to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it takes practice to really train and see the obsession of going after blind spots as being incredibly effective for your life.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? Because I see the same thing all the time. Like I'm surrounded around my network of, I'm still in this Tony Robbins alumni
Mhm.
group that I'm with, and most of them are own jets. I'm like the little guy in the group.
Where's
And
where's your
you're
jet?
right.
Right.
What's
And
that?
so you want we could have a therapy session around why don't I have a jet? You know, like
Yeah,
it's
totally.
okay.
Well, they
Don't
let me
feel
take
inadequate.
rides in theirs. I've
Yeah.
done a couple laps in jets, so it's been fun.
Well, actually, somebody once told me there's like the best strategy is not to be a type A, it's to be a clever type B who gets the type A's to get the jet that then, takes you around
They
the
get to
world.
cruise around in.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just
But what you
bring
said
the,
is exactly true.
yeah,
You visually think that they have no problems, and in
yeah.
some ways they have more profound problems because they're burying them.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that two things. One is that I have reached the point in life where I realize I see everybody as human. Like I don't see, oh, well, you're president of the United States, so you must be. I just think whoever it is, they're human, and I see them as a human being, and with all the different aspects to them. The second is, it's when you said, well, you're a seeker, and true, but also you got to remember that my day job is to capture in incredible detail exactly what people said. And so, and it's an interesting like balancing act between sometimes we just got to be really logical and focused and get stuff down. And then you say, okay, now let's be expansive and, and discover the meaning of life or see God or, whatever it is. But, um, I have this other, it's, it's not really a theory, it's an observation that another way to conceive of the best possible life, the best possible existence is can you move back and forth between those two endpoints? Like, can you be incredibly grounded, get shit done, say, okay, today's job is to make 10,000 bottles of Coke and ship it, like no question, very specific. And then when you're like trying to discover the meaning of life or inventing your next product or whatever it is, or launch another company, you can be expansive. And the people who, and the companies too, who can go back and forth, like, which are we doing today? We're going to be very detail oriented and anal. Okay, great, because we're in production mode. Or no, now we're going to switch to be, I'm going to be completely open minded because no one's ever solved this problem. So let's be the first. You know, it's that going back and forth when necessary, picking the mode. That's the other thing that I both uh, I love trying to get better at doing that, and I think the people who are closest to being fulfilled and successful can do both that. Like they can be okay. I'm going to work like a dog 24/7 until we get this product launched, and then I'm going to go hike, in the Himalayas for 2 weeks and clear my head and come back refreshed. And I remember Tom Brokaw, remember the NBC news
Hmm.
anchor, incredibly intense job, and he used to do that. He used to go big mountain climbing, take 3 weeks off, go do it, come back, and then work his, always on call job. I really admire that.
It's interesting. You're talking about energetic direction in some way. Like when I'm, not to necessarily always reference my book, but if the four phases,
Oh,
if I
what's the
look at
name of your book? No,
yeah,
Groundswell. Yeah.
is build is a really it's counterintuitive. It's like for an entrepreneur, it's like the energy is going backwards, like the bowstring taking time to take aim, right? It's
Right.
backwards. Give the new get is it's you're moving forward, you're offering, you're inviting.
Mm,
Grow isn't up, it's grow the roots for the fruits. It's like
mm,
it's movement down, it's deeper. And then ultimately transformation is ascension. So I believe in energetic direction in the way that we think for a business and in life, because you're right. I think when you can be multi-directional in your energy, in how
mm.
you chase it or create it or manifest it or move towards it, to me, I think it's powerful. It rounds you out because you can go in one direction. You're like a rut. You're kind of like,
Right.
there's some people that just are well rounded because he is probably like Tom Brokaw has to be a certain way, and this just kind of puts a little bit of balance in his life and harmony because he doesn't have he's out of balance 90%
Well,
of the
that's
time when
right.
he's at
That's right.
work, right? So
That's
that's
right.
balances it
Yeah.
out.
What you said when you said grow and you did the tree root analogy, I, that's especially powerful to me. Someone said to me recently that when you're trying to calm yourself down and really be centered and okay, what do I do next? Or that if you think of yourself as sitting under a tree, kind of, and emulating that, like I can both put roots down into the ground, and I can be so mimicking the tree that a wild animal would walk up to me and not even react to me, just like they wouldn't react to the tree trunk because I'm so still and I'm so rooted in that space and I'm part of it. And then okay, when you're done, then you go back into your life, your world, your action. But that ability um, is amazing. And it's kind of you would to me the toolkit of what skill do you need? What's the best skill right now? What's the best tool right now? They're all great analogies for how um, how to live an amazing life. I mean, I even go back to the comfortable in your own skin and charisma type of thing and see the people that, like, if you look at an actor who can really do that well, you see them in five different films and they're completely different. I mean, they're unbelievably different. And you think, well, they just do whatever's needed at that moment. That's a phenomenal skill.
Yeah, I've heard that, people that are like that, they it's not as like that when they're filming, they kind of almost carry it home. Like they're in that for the whole time that they're actually filming the film. I don't know if that's true because I'm not an
Some
actor and
do,
I'm not
not all
there.
do. So
Yeah.
I've been fascinated with that, and some do the opposite. I mean, in fact, I can already tell you that there's in this book I'm writing, um, there's a piece about that, the difference between being the actor versus the character. A good actor, in my description, would be someone who can be like, they can be a psychopath until 5:30 that night in the set, and they can go home and tuck their kid to sleep and be warm and that you don't have to carry that around in order to be like I could be incredibly forceful, playing the role of the CEO, or the corporate raid or whatever it is, and then just drop that when I don't need
Yeah,
it.
it's like
And
it's like a level of not professional. It's not the right word. It's like a level of proficiency, like to be able to do that, right?
well, it's
It's like
what
emotional command.
energy, right? It's what energy, what state should you be in at this moment, and if you're really in charge, and if you're really a capable person, you can decide. And if you're not deciding, you're not really in charge. I'm not sure who is, but it's certainly you shouldn't take the credit because if you just like if someone says something you don't like and you just freak out,
You
that's
have emotional control.
yeah, none. Yeah,
Yeah, you're controlled by circumstances, so that makes tons of sense. If you think from an actor, there's probably one that's the only way they can get there, and the other person is able. They've got more command and control of their 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 own emotions and energy, if you will.
yeah, yeah. Just makes sense. Do you have a sense of everything? Oh my God, I'm sorry I invited Bruce on again. I was like,
What was that?
I'm just saying this is a it's I know our dynamic is always you trying to get me to talk more about business. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to talk about business. I want to talk about this other aspect of
Oh
life.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's okay. I mean, these ones are always very special. They're more about life. It's philosophy. This is the philosophy. You're my philosophy guest.
yeah,
So, but I always try to keep a little bit of through line, and that's me
yeah.
trying to tie a little bit in with sustainable growth or whatever. But yes, we have that on every single episode. That's been
Right.
the tension, if you will. You know.
Right. But and someone said to me the other day, like, work-life balance. Oh, I know they asked me actually. I called a client, and the first thing they said to me was, um, "Which is more important to you, work or life?" And I said, "Life," because work is part of life, and everything's part of life, and so work's just a little piece of your life, and sometimes it's a big piece. But it's really how do you want to move through the world? Period. And okay, well, here's the challenge. To sometimes the toughest part of your day is your home life, and sometimes it's your work life, and sometimes it's commuting, and so. But you're the constant in that.
When people say work life balance, I just don't think it's real because
Yeah.
it's out of balance. You're out of balance when and you know it's consciously out of balance is the way I would look at it. If you want to be consciously out of balance, but like Tom Brokaw consciously knows he needs to create a counterbalance, it's about work life integration, knowing what's right for you, to so that you don't become a horrible human being around your
Right.
family or whatever, like, and you're miserable or whatever, and then you're in a rut and you can't know how to get out. Like, it's looking in the blind spots. Like, how do I balance this out? How do I show up in the world? And how I recognized it myself. Like, when I finished launching the book, I kind of crashed because I've been
Mm.
working. I launched 3 launches. My book, I I was running so hard, and I kind of just had to go, look, I need to, like, take care of myself now. It's time for me to take a different pace. But I was constantly out of balance to get
Right.
through these launches, and now I'm in a different phase. And
See,
I'm,
so
you
I
know,
would push back on that. I mean, I agree with what you said, but I'd say it differently, which is that that's not out of balance. That's your focus, in that launch period is let's call it business. It's like the professional life, and sometimes that's the right decision, and sometimes and you innately know, well, okay, then I got to take a breather. I got to recharge again. It's not out of balance. That's the way it should be. If all of a sudden, I don't know, there's a parade going down my street. There's never been a parade going down. I'm going to run out and say, what's going on here?
mm,
That's like being curious and also being, here's the greatest need. And I think that's wonderful. I mean, I gave the other analogy of, um, a friend of mine, a family friend, is they have a new baby, and she has a big job. Not the baby, the mother. And so she, at 5 o'clock every night, she um, the takes the kid from daycare, and and until it's actually 15 months, I said baby, but and then from 5 to 7 until the child goes to sleep, 100% present with the child, and my friend goes back to work at 7:15, and however long it takes. That's a really well structured life. You're doing it. No, this is the time I'm going to be fully present with my daughter. This time I'm going to be fully present at work, and this is the way to make it work. And this just leads to a really simple thing, which is that in order to have that, um, a fulfilled life, a life that doesn't have needless tension in it, I need to work with people or with an employer who's fine with that. That they don't, for example, I would never sell a word, like a word by the dollar. Like, you pay me the
mm,
$100 for 100 words or something like that, because I just want results. Do I magnify your talent? Great, pay me. Not, pay me for, like, you got to pay me to be there 12 hours a day, or, because I need the latitude to, okay, well, in order to have the energy to write in an extraordinary way, I got to go paddleboarding for 2 hours a day, and then you'd be thrilled with the work I do. And that's you know, I mean, that is the way I lead my life. My work-life balance is, I don't know. If you said to me, am I playing or working? Sometimes I couldn't tell you because I'll literally be, skiing or paddleboarding or something, and I'm actually solving a problem in the back of my head. And so which one was it? I don't know.
I think that's why I called it consciously out of balance. I'm, like, aware of it. I'm
Yeah.
consciously allowing myself to do it. You said something really cool a minute ago, which is about the example. She goes back and she spends time with her child. It's about presence.
Yeah.
And when we're
Right.
focused and present, like in this moment, I think this is what is wrong with a lot of what's going on is we're distracted and we're spread so thin and we're not really present anywhere. We're not present anywhere, but people are dying for presence for this. Like, we're
Mm.
in conversation. I'm not thinking about other things. I'm thinking about what you and I are saying. And I think in relationships, that's what my spouse wants is my presence when I'm
Yeah.
there. And she wants to know that when I'm here with her. And she's
Right.
okay with that because she knows that when I come back, I'm present with her. And I think business and life and relationships, presence is a really understated, underutilized, practice. And it is a practice to be present.
Well, so this is probably my greatest insight, and I don't mean my insight like I came up with it. I mean, like, I finally am starting to understand it. So I used to think that it was a rationalization to say, like people say, the path to happiness is happiness. Just decide to be happy, you'll be happy. And I used to think, well, that's a way to rationalize, to say, like, you didn't get the promotion you want, so now you're going to rationalize that, well, I don't need it, I'm just going to be happy. No. that if you're fully present, doing any task, completely immersed in that task, if you're washing the dishes and you 100% are immersed in washing the dishes, you're just doing nothing else. You can be in the zone. You can be in the zone like you're surfing a wave. You can be in the zone if you're sweeping the floor, and once you really get that, once you really get that, anytime you achieve like full presence, you are in the zone, you are happy, and you do an extraordinary job at it. And that's the thing I've realized this year. It still takes work, but it's the key to life is presence, because that's where you're in the zone, and that's where everything flows, and that's where it's not hard, and that's where you go to sleep a satisfied human being and fulfilled.
So you're a master at writing. One of my the one thing I learned, I guess, from writing a book was how to write a book, how to
Yeah.
get into flow. It took me 4 years. I mean, you know how
Mm.
long this took me.
Yeah, a
So,
long time. Yeah.
and now I'm like, my next book is going to rip out way differently because
Right.
I think I've learned how to get myself present and in
Right.
flow and disciplined. Where before, I don't know, I can't explain it. I would like write and I just couldn't get to it and then veer off. And so, what would you say? You're mastered this. Do you have a practice for getting in flow?
Well, I would say that mine is pretty simple, which is that it's kind of the opt-out strategy, which is that if I can't, don't sit down. Well, first of all, there's a couple of times I'm really good early in the morning. Um, I'm really good after I've done something that um, has energized me. So
Like physical,
if I
going
go
for,
ride my bike,
yeah.
go on the river, do whatever, I come back, I'm always energized. And sometimes same at night. Like when I get into those quieter moments where there's fewer distractions, I tend to do that. But the more important thing, if I sit down and I'm not present, I get up. And fortunately, I don't have the luxury of indefinite procrastination. I probably have 12, 14 clients at any one time, plus I'm writing my own stuff. So I can't procrastinate too much. I can't get a week behind, um, but I do. There's a number of times that I did it today. I had two assignments for one client. One I knew exactly how to do. I actually was looking forward to doing it. And the second haven't quite worked it out. And so I said, I'm going out to lunch and I'm going to do something else. And now I think I know how to do it. After this, I'm going to finish it. But I really think it's just knowing how you work, and saying, here's the here's the way that I can easily be ready. For example, sometimes um, the way I'll do that is I'll chunk it down. I'll say, I don't know how to write the whole piece, but I think I know how to write the opening. I'll write the opening, I'll just stop, get up, go ride a bike, or do somebody else's. A lot of times I just switch. I switch to somebody else's,
Is it a little bit like you
work.
just got to get to the gym?
Yeah, well, you just have to get to the point where you're eager to do that one, or at least
Right.
ready to do that one. And
Yeah.
and I think that, I mean, I'm a big I guess I'm a big proponent of, if you're good, I mean, it's great to be in the zone, don't get me wrong, but you really just need to be paying attention. Like, and if you're a professional at anything, you can do that. And with the exception of the days where you say, and so it's some combination of, okay, do the things that that make you feel good, and balance your work, like after lunch, not after lunch, but after I exercise, I'll do this. Um, but then sometimes you just have to say, something, this is not going to be like my life's work. It just needs to be significantly better than the client expected. I think I know how to do that. Just do it. And I do find sometimes I just get all of my satisfaction from, bang, bang, bang. I line them up, I get my work done. And then, by the way, when I operate like that, I still have time to do, oh, great, now we can go see Susan because, it's 4:30 and I'm done. And
Is it
so
like a reward?
yeah, it's exactly the reward. It's like, I can sit here and if I sit here and procrastinate all day, I'm going to have a really boring life because I'm never going to go have fun. And so, um, you know, so it's just, but a lot of people. I think one of the reasons why more people don't start companies, they don't write books, they don't write songs, they don't, paint masterpieces because they think mistakenly, oh, when like inspiration comes to me, like angels will sing, and it's really not
That's what
how
I
it
did for
works.
3 years,
Yeah, it
waiting for
doesn't work that
inspiration.
way.
Okay, I'm inspired. I'm going to go write. And it came once in a while, but it didn't come very often. So that's why it took so long. Then
I saw
eventually
John,
I came up with a plan.
right? I saw John Mayer, the singer songwriter, just like a 2 minute clip of him being interviewed, and he said, "You know how I write songs? I just pick up the guitar and I start going like, Billy had a sheep, and he said, I just sing nonsense until then I say, wait a minute, fathers be good to your daughters. Hey, wait, there's something there, and then what would come, and you just and I've done
Build
that
on it.
sometimes where just like I don't really try and write songs, but I just the few times I have, I just pick up a guitar and start playing. And then you tape it and you see, hey, that last line was okay. What can you do with that? So it's not really inspiration. It's just like, just start, just start.
Yeah, I
You
find I
can't
have
believe
to
the number.
clear the
Sorry,
noise in my head.
yeah. The
You
number of
know,
people who write to me and say, how do you be a writer? And I say, well, how much have you written so far? They say nothing. I say, well, start writing. And then, if you write for a year, call me back and I'll give you some advice. But like, okay. And then people say, oh, thank you. That's great advice. Like, you just got to start.
well, I found I had all these ideas in my head,
Mm,
and I was like, but they were like from a long time ago, and I hadn't written them down. So now,
yeah.
whenever I got a thought, I have
Mm,
notes on my phone. If I wake up in the middle of the night, I got an idea, I'll just write it down. And I
yeah.
start, they're like
Yeah.
little puzzle pieces that I'm already like, I've got a full concept for my next book. I'm actually
Yeah.
quite excited about it. And I'm like, not going, oh, I got to write a book. I'm actually in a totally different mindset with it. It's,
Well, I would
I'm
argue
sure.
if you really want to write a book, write down every story that comes to you. Whether something happens in the coffee shop or,
Okay.
when you're in a business meeting, just capture the story. And when you have 50 stories, write a book because now you have a good book. It's a really simple framework, but it's like get 50 stories, got a good book. Assuming they're all under one umbrella. But um, you what you're saying is a piece of it, but it's the thing that brings these things to life is that they're stories and people can say, oh yeah, and like you were telling me about we were talking before we started about cat skiing and I think you told me two stories in just in like 65 seconds. Well, we all have stories. We just forget them by the time we sit down to write and just keep writing stories, stories, stories. Every time you see something, like one anecdote is worth $1,000 to somebody who wants to write a book because that's $50,000 worth. You got a book right there.
Beauty. It's like when stories, it's funny you say it because like sometimes you can find these insights in just all these like stories, and you got to believe there's some sort of divine reason you might be thinking of or being experienced the story that you could weave in, right? Like we talked about heli skiing. So heli skiing, the one of the cool things I learned about heli skiing when I was filming was I was always at the back. So the athletes got the best runs. And by the way, this is like when I say I got the leftovers, it's still pretty juicy, right?
Right.
Like
Yeah.
let's just be
Yeah.
honest. But
Yeah.
but but being a purist, like wanting to have like the beautiful line, right? So I'm in the back because I'm the producer with the tail guide, and I wasn't grumbling, but I was just like, oh man, I got to find my line. He goes, Scott, all you have to do is go off in a slight angle
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
look down the mountain, not the way that they went down, on an angle, a
Yeah.
tilt, a new angle, and you this is how you milk the runs. He goes, I'm a tail
Right.
guy. I figured this out. I go, I get the best runs of my life. I'm like, they don't even see the lines.
Right.
So you go off to the side and you're like, we call it the milk run.
Right.
And that's and I kind of liken that to content, like how so it's a story
Mm.
about a cat skiing, but it's like your tilt. Find your tilt in
That's
your
right.
content you
You
want to
you
create.
just you just perfectly illustrated the
Yes.
concept. That's exactly right. Exactly right.
But it's like a story that like, and that's where I think it's kind of fun is to like really challenge yourself and write. I have this thing called word wells. So when I do branding, going, what are the
Yeah,
words that really like uniquely describe your brand? And I've expanded that to what are the stories, the origin stories of your
right.
brand.
Yeah,
And because you can't always remember them on the moment when you, but so every time a story comes up, even if you don't know what it is, put it in and tell me. Maybe there's a an antidote. Maybe there's like a metaphor. Maybe there's like a lesson. And because
mm,
that's what people really resonate with is describing the story.
yeah. I mean, I think the other thing to do
You do, by the way,
is
I don't mean to stop you real quick, but
mhm.
your LinkedIn, the thing you that's what you do all the time.
Yeah, yeah. I try. I mean, what I was going to say was that if you just change the angle a little bit, just like your, milk run, that's what, and you do that when you interview people. I try and do that if somebody says, like if somebody reaches out to me and says, write about my book, my show, my whatever, and they already have a lot of press, then the thing I look at is there something I can ask them that nobody else has asked them, and in which case I'll do it, and if I can't, or if they're not open to that, I won't do it, because it's always I did that recently. I published something with Stu Friedman, the Wharton professor who's written a bunch of books. And when I interviewed him, he said, "Oh, nobody's ever asked me that before." I'm like, yes, because that's how you make it interesting. And both for him, for me, and for anybody who sees it.
Yeah, Tim Ferriss does a good job with that on his podcast,
Oh yeah,
is asking
really
these
good.
like really interesting questions that really draw stories from people. You know, I
Yeah.
could take a master class on doing that. I feel like I'm not trying to ask original questions. I'm trying to just like have a conversation is where I'm at. Like I'm not trying to.
Well, you listen. I mean, I've said this to you before. You listen really well, and then you think, and it's shocking the number of people who don't do that. They're like, okay, great. I asked my question 8. Now I'm going to ask my question 9, and that's boring to people.
It's funny. Ever since I did this podcast, I think we may have talked about this on one of the episodes. Is I Michelle? She used to work for Extra TV. I can't remember her name's Michelle, and she had me on her podcast. And I asked her advice. I go, "How do you interview?" She goes, "Don't have notes.
Yeah,
Do your
yeah,
homework, but show up and be present,
yeah,
and go where the conversation goes."
right.
That's the most interesting thing to listen to
Yeah,
for the
no, I
listener.
agree. If you look at like, and I don't know whether they have notes or not, but if you look at like David Letterman in his news show, the one
Oh,
where
I
he
love
looks
it.
like Moses, and and he seems like he does that on that. At least he creates the impression that he does that, because if somebody says something like, go back, what did you just say there? And so I love that.
I love that too. So, what's next for you? You moved to Bend. You got this book. What's kind of on the horizon
So
for
the
Bruce?
two things are, well, three things. I'm still ghostwriting for entrepreneurs. Cruft will come out. I don't know when it will come out because we're
How do you
writing
spell
it
cruft?
first. Cruft.
Cruft. Okay,
Yeah.
interesting.
Cruft will come out, I don't know, let's call it a year and a half from now, probably. Um, and I'm starting, literally just decided this month to start something called Bend Reality, like Bend, Oregon, but reality,
Mm-hmm.
in which I'm going to do a version of what we were talking before about you've done with surf photos. I'm going to start off by curating the most original. I call it non-thinkers, not thinkers, but non-thinkers, the people who are really good at, you know, opening up. So, for example, Dr. Lisa Miller, I haven't asked her yet, so I'm just mentioning her anyway. I've interviewed her before. Um, she created a spirituality center at Columbia University, and she says like we're all hardwired. Human beings are hardwired for spirituality, and what does that mean? And you can open yourself up to all sorts of insight by that. I follow a guy named Scott Britton on Substack who's writing really interesting pieces about consciousness raising, and I'm going to curate that sort of thing both in person in Bend, um, and meaning either for people in Bend or people who want to come for a weekend to Bend, and then also just virtual. And I'm going to start small, late fall of this year,
Is
and
it a
try and
video series or what is it?
it's going to be lots of things. There'll be live. So for example, one thing I've done already, and I'm just going to reposition it, is when I started my Substack newsletter, which is now called Bend Reality. Um, Originally, if you paid the subscription, you also got access to, we did a monthly gathering on Zoom, and it really worked well. And then I started moving, and I couldn't keep up the schedule. But I'm going to reconstitute that sort of approach. So there'll be, monthly or biweekly sessions where we gather online. Um, I might do kind of a version of a speaker series where I interview somebody, and those will be scheduled as as is. And then we'll do. I've been looking for a long time. At this point, I know a lot of. I don't know what to say. It sounds pretentious to say enlightened people, old souls, and I've been looking to bring some of them together along with new old souls that that come across my trail. And so I'm going to start to bring, 10, 15, 20 people at a time to Bend and just kind of hang out and compare notes. So I'm
So you're
really
kind of
excited about
creating a
it.
community.
It's yeah, uh, it's just, I've done a few things this past year. We probably don't have time to explore them, but um, if you
We
set
have
up
all
a
the time you
community,
want. Keep going.
okay. If you set up well, I'll give you a specific example. Um, Dr. Srikumar Rao, RAO, runs the Rao Institute. Um, he has a course he's been going for 15 years. He used to teach it at Columbia. He's taught it at other universities, and it's called CPM, Creative and Personal Mastery. And it's a 3-month course. I took it virtually, this where are we? The last 4 months. It ended a couple months ago, but it took that long to go through. And it really, he's distilled down um, all the great wisdom from uh, major religions, minor religions, great philosophers into a program that's very interactive. Like you get hooked up online with you do small group sessions once a week, and every other week everybody comes together with Dr. Rao, and you literally figure out the nature of reality. I mean, you figure out like um, from the simple, like is this good or bad? He would argue there's no such thing. Like you don't label things, it just is. And to who are you? Well, you're not who you think you are. Yeah, and I don't mean like your personality is different. I mean, you know, I guess
It's
he's
I am.
closer to
Who's
the
running you?
right. Well, the first thing is, so one of the things that we talked about, which has rapidly became one of my favorite books, is The Surrender Experiment by Michael Singer. Have you ever read that?
Nope.
Oh, amazing,
Writing
amazing
it down.
book. Right. He's so, his name's Mickey Singer. He's I don't know. He's probably 70 something now. When he was a hippie in Florida, um, he just wanted to go meditate in the woods. And so he wanted to buy like 5 or 10 acres of land for, $100 or something so he could just build a hut and not be disturbed. And and in doing that, he realized he's not the voice in his head. He observes the voice in his head, and he's just going to surrender to whatever the flow of the universe takes him. And it took him every time he like tried to build his hut, someone would show up and say, "Well, if you build it bigger, we'll pay for it." Or if and basic, long story short, it ended up he built like what they call a temple. It's like I think they have 3,000 acres in Florida. People have been coming there for decades now. And every time he didn't want to do the next thing. Like so he wasn't a goal-driven person. He just was pushed by the universe. I know this sounds like what? But he was pushed by the universe to pursue the temple. And then he wrote these two best-selling books, one of which is The Surrender Experiment, and then what's it, and the other one is Stillness. I forget. Oh, The Untethered Soul, and
Oh, I know the Untethered Soul. I just got
yeah,
that book.
which is a great book, but harder to read than The Surrender Experiment. He also started a multi-hundred-million
Did he write
dollar
the Untethered Soul?
yeah yeah
Oh, he was speaking
yeah
at Tony Robbins event I was at.
yeah
Yeah.
and he's just so he built this massively profitable company. He built this he didn't want to do any of it. He didn't want to have anything to do with it. He just kept surrendering to where the universe pushed him, and the
Mm-hmm.
surrender experiment is all about this. So anyway, all these things have convinced me that the world doesn't work the way that we think it does. Um, you
I'd
can
agree.
get kind of like, you know, it somewhere between what we think and what the Matrix, the movie said is reality. It's not like there aren't action figures like in the Matrix. There aren't fight scenes every 5 minutes, but there certainly are.
There's a lot more to know the more you know. Like
Yeah.
I did, do you remember Jeffrey Morf, who wrote Crossing the Chasm?
Oh yeah, sure. And
Yeah, so I
Inside the
did an interview with
Tornado.
him.
Yeah. Yeah.
He just did a new book on the quantum field.
Oh, okay.
I
I didn't
could
know this.
barely keep up with him. He's so smart.
Oh, I should check that out. The other person I love, who I only know because of you, is Elizabeth Lindsay, and
Oh, I love her. I'm
and
doing
and
this.
and
Go ahead.
she. I'm not going to say what she said because I don't have permission, but I recently wrote to her, asked her kind of like, "What's the meaning of life?" type question, and unsurprisingly, she had a phenomenal answer, which she sent back, and I can't tell you how greatly I respect her, because she has really spent a lot of her life and energy in not just accessing kind of ancient wisdom and trying to document it, but also then doing the work inside, the internal work herself, which sometimes conflicts with what she's doing externally, and listening to her, as even though I've only interacted with her a few times, but it's like, okay, how long do I have to wait before I can bug her again, because she's just
Oh,
truly an old soul, and so
you know,
I thank you for that.
you're welcome. She and I did a podcast,
Mm,
and we're starting a series called Wayfinders. So it's a little bit like
mm,
Guru Singh. Guru Singh and I have produced about 25 hours of production. And it's called The Mindful Marketer. And it's just having these discussions like we're having
mm.
now about this intersection of business, brand, and combined with universe, nature, law of nature, and the universe, and spirituality, and
Right.
energy. It's
Mm.
it's the most interesting 25 hours you're gonna ever see. It's incredible. And so Dr. Elizabeth and I are going to do the same thing about ancient wisdom and its
Mm.
application, modern application for business and life. And we're going to do the same production. Me and her, we start production this month, actually.
Oh, that's great. I want to be kept up on that. To anyone who's listening, she's amazing, and this combination between the two of you will be wonderful.
She, and a lot of people don't know this about her. She's a Hawaiian elder.
Yeah.
She's an ambassador for indigenous and ancient. I'm not sure. Well, like the indigenous tribes
Mm.
and language, ancient languages and stuff. For like, we're talking about remote villages that
Yeah.
she's documented in Micronesia and stuff. So she's
Mm.
part of the UN with that. I mean, she knows the Dalai Lama. I mean, she is
Yeah.
connected and
Yeah.
very powerful woman. And I just, every day that I get a chance to chat, she doesn't call me Scott, she calls me Koa. And just have such I just leave just like enlightened.
Well,
She's
I
just so
think
wise.
that's a wonderful example of how anyone could be, which means that you can do amazingly impactful things. You can be highly recognized by everyone, anyone, major organizations, and still be like in tune enough to say, like, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend 2 weeks listening to this 72-year-old man who's never been off his island, because I am present enough to know that's what I should be doing, and there's wisdom there, and that's, I may talk about a powerful lesson just by how you lead your life. Never mind whatever wisdom is there. And you know,
She's a wisdom
wisdom.
seeker. Like she is so wise. Oh my goodness. Thank you for bringing her up, and I'm glad you connected with her. And
Yeah,
I'll mention you when we chat briefly here coming up.
please do.
I'll
Yeah.
I'll be looking forward to it. Maybe there's a three-way collab at somewhere in here somewhere.
Oh,
Like
anytime.
I love
I will.
collabs.
You tell me anywhere, anytime. I would love to do that.
Okay, I'm gonna think of something because I think
Okay.
I really see some of the ideas that is like bringing unconventional people together to create something,
Mm,
and you
yeah.
don't pre-plan it. It's just like what's going to happen. I think that is something that I'm sort of like expanding into a little bit, and it really came forward after this Guru Singh interaction. Has
Mm.
just completely transformed the way that I'm looking at what I'm have energy for, and I'm just doing it because I mean, if it works and it makes money, that's a byproduct. I'm doing it
Right.
because I'm loving it. You know what I mean?
Well, I'll
It's like
give
this
you one
podcast.
example.
If
So
nobody came to this podcast, I'd still want to talk to you for an hour.
right, right, me too. Uh, when I talked about Srikumar Rao, so I'm now in his alumni association because it's the only standalone course that has an alumni association.
Yeah.
And so I did my first call last week. And so here's the powerful thing, and it's what you just said, like bring together unconventional people with no agenda. So we have this hour-long call. It's and in it you break off. Sometimes you talk one-on-one or one, three of you. And so we're 5 minutes into the call. I'm paired up with a woman from Barcelona I've never met before. 2 minutes later, we're deep in this incredibly personal, deep conversation. And it's all possible because once you're in a community like that, and everyone here is here to grow and we don't want superficial. We want to really go to the core of whatever, anything.
Hmm.
Um, it's, I mean, because at the end, this woman said to me, like, I don't even know you, and I've told you things that I haven't talked about to another person in in years. There's tremendous value once you say anyone in this community. Here's how we conduct ourselves. It's confidential. There's trust, but we are here to 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 go deep into our shared, you know, perceptions, maybe to be more expansive, whatever it is that's set up. I mean, another guy who I would encourage you, if you haven't run across, I think I might have said this to you once before. Maybe you did it and I didn't know. Did I ever mention Charles Vogel to you before?
Sorry, Charles, who?
Vogel, Vogl.
I don't recall.
So he wrote a book. I think the name is The Art of Community. He has spent his adult
Oh,
life
interesting.
thinking about what community means and what it takes to form a really powerful, strong, tight knit community. Fascinating guy to talk to. I highly recommend.
I am
I'll
going
introduce
to
you if you
jump
want.
on that.
Yeah,
Do you know
yeah.
him?
Oh yeah, quite well.
Can
Yeah,
you make introduction? I just
absolutely.
did
Yeah.
a I just interview with Mark Schaefer. He wrote the book called Belong to the Brand,
Okay.
and I've launched my community. I'm really full court press into. I just interviewed Gina from Mighty Networks, building communities,
Oh
and
yeah, yeah.
community. I think is the new place that people going to feel trust and expand, and it's going to be the antidote to this whole AI content overload, all the nonsense that's
Right.
starting to. People are becoming more mistrustful of all this social networks and stuff, and I think community is going to be a powerful way for people to expand their thinking. I think it's going to be great.
Well, you'll love Charles because not only first he wrote The Art of Community from a really community standpoint, and then he
Hmm.
wrote. I'm forgetting the name of the second book, but it was specifically for brands and community. So he's got both angles down, and he's done a lot of work with Google. He's really extraordinarily interesting. I believe he was a divinity student before he did this turn. A very deep, astute guy.
Consider him booked. Just let's get in
I'll
touch.
introduce
I'm
you. Yeah.
I'm 100% interested. Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'll do that after we talk.
And just on that note, here's something I would offer you. You know,
Mhm.
Bruce, you have community. People follow you in droves and listen, and they just like fawn over your writing, and you've created a community. Why don't you actually, with all the things that you do, you're just a great community leader that brings in these concepts, these people together. Why don't you create a community for yourself, like an
Well,
actual
thank you for
community?
saying that, but that's bent reality. That's what
Oh,
I
it's going to be a community. Beautiful. I love
yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
I'm glad you're doing that. Are you going
No,
to do it on a
100%.
platform?
And well, I'm going to, I mean, I guess you could say that it's going to start on Substack because I already have a,
Hmm.
a base there. And I literally wrote to the people yesterday and saying, I'm rebranding this. Your congratulations, you already made it in the door. And included in those people who already are on Substack with me are all, pretty much all the people who were part of the monthly calls, and they know me well and vice versa. So. Yeah, so I
I
have a
didn't
little
know
bit of a
what
head start.
Substack's capability is for community management and inclusion and
It
stuff,
won't
but
be you know chatting, although they did start notes, but um, I'm not so worried about um, you know I should give a shout out to Eric Winters on who runs Halo, Heylo, who on whose platform Charles Vogel has built a little community for community
hmm
organizers, and I was part of that. Um, and that's a good platform. And Eric's a great guy, a really great guy. Um, but I'm less concerned about that, like what how to host the community, because it's so easy today to, if we want to do Zoom, we just set up a Zoom call. If we want to meet in person, I
hmm
mean, um, it's more. I mean, and Substack I love because it's really taken all the work out of signing up people and sending them out notices. I just go and I type a note and it's gone. It's
hmm
so easy. Um, so to me the hardest part, right, and that's why I suggested Charles to you. Well, I'll give you an example from my experience with Charles. So I'm on this. And I don't think this violates confidentiality. And if it does, I'm sorry, Charles, but I'm not going to name names. But basically, so Charles starts this group. There are, let's say there's 20 of us, and we're talking once a week on Zoom about the challenges of running a community. I'm really the only person at this point who wasn't running a community when we did this. And there was someone who was helping Charles who just had the perception that he was helping Charles, like I'm helping with the technology, whatnot. And he said that, well, if I was a part, like on the call, if I was a part of this community, I might suggest this. So he was just trying to be deferential and nice. And Charles was like, "What are you talking about? Of course you're a member of the community." And he said, "Well, I just thought I was helping with the technology, And we were in the middle of a conversation around what makes you a member, meaning what are the rituals, what are the you know
requirements.
qualifications, what are the
Yeah,
and most people do not think about that. Like, okay, great, I'm going to host a community. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean if you want to come to one call, you're in the community? Well, that's not much of a community, and so that's why sometimes things like you said about making a lot of money or not, sometimes it's worthwhile to charge, I'm going to charge you $700, not because I'm going to get rich charging people $700, because if I figured out that's not too much of a barrier, but it makes you
commitment.
think about this decision,
Yeah, to
So
commitment. Yeah.
yeah, and then what's the ritual? What's the ceremony? Do we have a secret handshake? I mean, it sounds goofy, but it really makes a difference. Like if you have a strong community and um, you know, you will do things for those other people and
hmm
vice versa. Not just out of a sense of, oh, I tit for tat, but out of a sense of, no, I want to help. We share values, we have common goals. I want to help other people.
People that are in my community, if they're showing up with integrity, they're looking to make a difference in the world, and they're just like demonstrating they're present and wanting to take care of people, I give them an
Mm,
invite, and it's invite only. It's called OGs, and you
yeah.
get OG status, and you actually get a
Mm,
different profile photo that's done for you. It's a
right.
ritual, and it's
Yeah.
invite only. It's like it's based on you know me deciding, and now soon enough it'll be the group can decide who can come in, and it's just it doesn't
Right.
mean that everyone else is excluded. It just means that this is a little area where we talk differently, and their interest is how do we make this community better. That's it.
Right.
It's really
Yeah.
cool. So I want to do more of that. So yeah, I think that's rituals and routines and not rules, but sort of like parameters. I think is really
Yeah. Charles has
people
really
want that.
broken it down well. There's like, I forget exactly, I won't mess it up, but there's like 7 levels.
Oh, he's
And
got to figure it out. Like here's the
oh, he's
perfect
really
seven
got to
things.
figure. I'm
Oh, I
telling
can't wait to read it. I
anybody.
can't wait to talk to
Yeah,
him.
no, he's a great guy. Um, yeah.
Okay, so let's share with people where they can follow you in your community or your soon-to-be community. If there's a holding pen for when they can join. So now I'm going to put you on the spot. If you have a wait list, or where can they follow you?
Yeah, so two things. So you can go to kasanoff.com. That's my website, Kasanoff.com. If you go to Kasanoff, was it Substack, you get to Bend Reality. Um, if you also go to bendreality.net, you'll get to a sign up page. So, and the sign up page is just, it's like, yes, I want to be on the invite list when it happens. And yeah, and those are the two things. And, I'm always on LinkedIn, but that's it. And I'm like, I hope, well, I know but I hope other people know that, I try and be very open and curious. And I really love hearing from anybody who's interesting, and I especially love. It's hard to say if you're an old soul, reach out, but if you resonate with any of the stuff that you and I have talked about, I'm interested in meeting more people like that.
Beautiful. And before we wrap, I just want to again thank you for writing the intro to my book. It's a beautiful intro.
Oh, it was a
Many
privilege,
people,
and
yeah.
and 8 and 10 years from now, people say, "Wow, how did you get to do that?" Because I mean, I actually think. By the way, I think that we didn't talk about this, but I have to say that I know that you and I go back to Don Peppers and Martha Rogers and the One-to-One Future, and other people who have no idea what we're talking about, just look it up. But Don Peppers and Martha Rogers, their first book, which sent them on this amazing success path. Um, 6 months into it, it was like slowly selling and slowly selling, and it was truly a groundswell. And they got lucky, and the web sprung up. Like 6 months after the book came out, and the people said, "Oh my God, this is the first book about the web," even though the web didn't even exist, when they were writing the book. And I think your book is similar, not just because of the title, but also because I think of the way um, that people are responding and will respond to it, meaning that you start to say, "Wait a minute, let me spend some time with it." And what happened in their case was, I forget the exact thing, but basically, like, the editor of Inc. magazine said this is the book of the year, and then Tom Peters said George Gendron was wrong. It's not the book of the year; it's the book of the decade. And
decade.
bang,
Yeah.
they're off and running. And
Yeah.
but it wasn't like, oh my God, like Stephen King has released his next book, lets a million people buy it. It goes like that, and I can see that happening with your book. And I actually thought that, way back when you sent me a draft, that this is gonna. It's interesting title, because it's gonna. My bet, if I bet you $1, would be it's gonna move like that. So
Thank you. And I do think the timing is really interesting because communities are on the rise, and this is the template strategy for building a community that's going to make a difference in the world for people that want to make impact.
you should write that down. I like that. You just summarized it really nicely, actually. I like that
Oh,
a lot.
thank you. Well, I wrote the book, and I'm 100% honored Don and Martha, their work. That was what brought. I mean, without me working with their work, and that's what brought this whole. The DNA is
Yeah,
all over there, and I honor them in it. So
yeah,
yeah, thank you
yeah.
for the introduction to them as well.
My
And
pleasure.
I ended
And
up,
and
yeah,
and anything you can do to promote this episode, because I'm going for the Red Hot Chili Peppers. I want to pass them, so if I
got
can,
it.
not to be too obnoxious, but
Well,
be
you've
happy
got
to
three
dream.
consistency. It's like it starts getting momentum. People are going to go in the back catalog too. So
Who is this guy? Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
All right. Thank
Well,
you. I
thank you so
always have
much.
so much fun talking to you. I really do. And I, I
We're
thank
going
you.
to have you back when you finish your book, and we'll talk about your book and your community. That
Oh no,
hopefully
bring Heath.
you'll
You'll
change your
love
mind
Heath.
and be on a platform, but we'll see.
No, seriously, I just want to give a call out to Heath Eichert, who I mentioned is my co-author, because he is one of the most expansive people I have ever met, and oh my God, you would love him. So uh,
Expansive or expensive?
expansive. Well, both.
Expansive. Is he somebody that I want to interview? Is that what you're saying?
Well, with me, because otherwise he doesn't do much social media, but I will persuade him,
Well, maybe
at the
we'll
right
have
time.
you
But
both on when you guys
yeah,
finish publishing your book.
yeah,
How's that
that's
sound?
right. Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be great.
I'd love
That'd be
that.
great.
All right. Well, we'll wrap
Thank
it
you
up.
so much.
And everyone that's listening, thank you so much for being on another episode. And as always, go to groundswell.fm, There's the speak pipe there. Leave me a voicemail. Let me know what you liked, what you loved, what you didn't like, whatever. And join our community, groundswellinnercircle.com. And until next time, mahalo.